as I mentioned in my previous clip, we had fun times in the 50s as children. Everything was so much easier. There wasn't so many rules and regulations. Hardly any cars on the street. Everyone had things on hire purchase where you're paying off for it over and over. And eventually when we got a TV, even that was paid off on a monthly, weekly? Yeah, I think it was paid off on a weekly basis. And the rent man used to come around and we'd give him our rent book and he would sign it where my mother's paid the rent. As children, we spent most of our time outside on the streets. Mainly in our street, in fact, and everyone knew each other. And normally every street had a busybody, and we had one as well. She used to sit outside her house every day. And she had a nice looking daughter who was older than us, so we never really got to know her too well. We just knew her name. I think it was Anne. And that's, when I think about it, there was a lot of us boys there. There was Christopher, who was virtually facing me, John next door, and at the corner of the street there was Alex and Dave. Dave was overweight, but just as energetic as we were, and he was a psychopath. And no fear. The boy had no fear. And also there was John at the other end of the street, and his father worked for a film studio, I think as a cameraman, and he was kept indoors most of the time. Us boys, apart from John, I don't think we could have been controlled by our parents. So we didn't agree with our parents. We would just ignore them and do what we wanted to do. I never really got into the other boys' houses except for John. John, he had quite a big family and people were coming and going all the time. I'll never forget his brother, Alex. Alex was, I don't know, several years older than the rest of us and very good looking. And he had sex appeal, which is, I guess sort of on the level of Tom Cruise or someone like that. Very good looking, as I said, and he could get any girl he wanted, that fellow. It wasn't just looks, of course. He had this personality. It was a strong personality, a man's personality, but it wasn't aggressive. It was intelligent. He ended up with a very good looking girl. This girl was older than him. She must have been around late 30s, early 40s, but so sexy. Even I fancied her as a kid. And just a reminder, if you like my videos, please give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Thank you. And then eventually he ended up, and I was a teenager by then, he ended up with this other girl who was probably around my age, 17, 18, and she was a typical 60s chick. And she used to wear those big, round, floppy hats, a floppy brim, mini skirts, and not too high shoes, but not too high heel shoes, but yeah, very, very nice. And false eyelashes. That was typical of the 60s. But getting back from the 60s back into the 50s, we're going too fast here for you, I know. As I said, less cars on the street. Everyone knew each other. We used to go cycling to the countryside, me and the other boys. Can you imagine? Under 10 years of age, cycling along the A roads, because there wasn't much cars, as I said. We'd go to Sidcup, around that way, the countryside. And the countryside wasn't so far in those days, but now it's all being built up. There was what they had, the government called it, I think it was called green fields or something. In other words, it was protected by the government. They weren't allowed to build on them, those fields. But of course, as times changed, the government changed the rules because there were so many people now. I did notice the mother across the road who had this, she had a husband as well, but the mother had this child who was younger than us, and when we stopped building bonfires, he was supposed to take over, but he didn't. He had become a totally different character to the rest of us who were coming from the the early 50s. And I could see the change, and it did surprise me that they took no interest in the things that we took interest in, climbing trees. And of course, when I was a youngster, there was a lot of bomb sites everywhere. A lot of places got bombed, and we used to have a great time. For us, these bomb sites were playgrounds. And I'd be running along, and it happened quite a few times, where a nail was sticking up through a piece of wood lying on the ground, and I step on it as I'm running, and it goes straight through my shoe into my foot. I'd rush home. Oh, I'd rush home, and my mother would put some hot water out in a bowl and put a little bit of disinfectant in there and put my foot in there, and that was it. We didn't bother going to the doctor. And it was great in those days. Everyone knew their doctors. The doctor we went to, there was 2 doctors, I think, on duty there, and they would see us the same day. We'd just go and they would see us. There was no making appointments and things like that. Everything was more laid back. And if we found something in an old house and it was miles away, we could take it on the underground. No one said, "Oh, you're not allowed to take that on the underground." It might have been anything. Could have been a table. 2 of us carrying it, 2 boys, carrying up the escalator and things. Can you imagine a cooker or something? No one said a thing. You try and do that today. There's so many rules and regulations. It drives me mad. I did hire a car not long ago, and it was so intense driving that car, because there's the speed limits everywhere, and they're changing a speed limit everywhere you go. It's 20 miles an hour here, 30 there, 40, 50, 60, and if you miss one of those and you're going too fast, you're going to get nicked and possibly get a thing against you, and maybe even forced to go to one of these classes so you don't get it a thing against you, a tick. So yeah, it's terrible, it really is. But getting back to my childhood, most of our time we was playing football. I wasn't really good at football. I mean, I kicked the ball one way and it would go the other way. But I had a lot of enthusiasm, and I'd get in there and do my best, so no one seemed to notice, I think. But yeah, every evening playing football. So we all were terribly fit, because if we wasn't playing football of some type, we used to play, I think it was called murder ball, where you're kicking this ball up against the wall, each one taking their turn kicking the ball up against the wall. And the wall was actually the outside wall to the front room of my mate's house, Alex and Dave, the Psycho Dave. It was their front room. But I'm just amazed, as their mother, who was home all day, never said a word. But this is mothers. Children, especially the boys, they can't do any wrong. I don't know why. Oh, I forgot. I mentioned people living in our street. There was also a girl, Denise Beaumont, and her brother called Dave, who was a little bit younger than us, I think, a few years younger. So he didn't really mix with us. But I think they used to stay in most of the time, those two. I'm not sure. But Denise Beaumont and Dave used to be my play friends when I was really young. And I fancied Denise Beaumont as a 3-year-old, I did. She turned out to be terribly intelligent and got an 11 plus and things. But they moved out quite early from their place. They went into he bought a place. Well, when I say bought a place, the bank owns it, doesn't it? It's but he managed to get a deposit for a place in Peckham. And I never really saw her again, except once or twice they came around on their bicycle, her and her brother, to say hi. And by then there was a sort of distance between us because years had gone by, and I'd like to see now how she turned out. It'd be quite interesting. I'm sure she got an office job. As I said, out of the whole street of boys and girls, she was the most intelligent. And my mate John, who was virtually a next door neighbour, he had some good looking sisters, but one of them who was more our age was Christine, and I always fancied her. And she had some toes missing. She got run over by a bus when she was really young. Number 42 bus in London. And just a reminder, if you like my videos, please give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Thank you. But yeah, so eventually, when I was about 5, my father bought our own TV, which was amazing. Buying a TV, as I said, most TVs were rented, rental company. And the good thing about TVs, when they broke down, which was often, the rental company would come around and fix it. It was all included in the rent, you see. And it was all black and white in those days, of course. America had colour TVs, but we had black and white going right up to about 69, 70, 71 maybe, I don't know, before we had colour. And now, of course, you get TVs, they last forever, don't they? And they're very small. Our TVs, of course, were huge, even if the screen was small. But most kids like myself, we had pets. When I was really young, we had dogs, and I had a dog and a big dog, and I used to ride. I was so small I could ride on my dog's back like a horse. And then I had rabbits and hamsters and mice and rats and a tortoise. My mum recently, before she died, when she was in her 80s, she admitted that she got my tortoise and put it outside on the street. And I was horrified when I heard that, because I always wondered how comes because I did find my tortoise once walking along down the road, and I couldn't understand how my tortoise got out the door. My mum obviously did it, but she'd done it a second or third time, and after that, of course, I never saw my tortoise again. That was it. When my father died when I was 7, this is 1958, he died, I thought, oh, no more beatings. And my mum started beating me after that. She would just get angry over nothing. She used to want to have me to go and cut my hair. And for some reason, I didn't want it cut. If she said one thing, I didn't want, I go the opposite way. A lot of kids do that for some reason. I don't know why. But she should have, instead of trying to force me to cut my hair, she should have said, well, if you don't get it cut, all the other boys, all your mates are going to think you're a weirdo. And I would have probably rushed down to the barber shop and got it cut. I never forget, he had a plank of wood, he'd stick it across the arms of the chair in the barber shop, and he'd sit me on the plank of wood because I was so small and cut my hair. It was always short back and sides, please.